So let me share with you a personal injury case example, basically where the client flubbed it. I want to just share with you. So he took the course and then he went out and started doing things, but he flubbed it. He didn't do what we trained. And so let me just share with you what happened. And I want to share it with you so you don't do this. That's why I want to share it with you, okay? So he called me today and he just finished with the deposition. And we were talking about how it went. And so here's the bottom line, is he did not, what's the first thing he did wrong? I'm going to go through everything he did wrong, okay? So the very first thing he did wrong, the good news is he had the attorney refer him a case. I forget how he got the case, but anyway, so the attorney referred him a case. He did not know this attorney. So remember, when you don't know if you have not done a sales presentation to an attorney, that's the first thing out of the block you have to do, and you have to do it as fast as possible. Why? Because they're going to treat you like a lower class citizen, like they treat all chiropractors that don't know what they're doing with personal injury documentation. Remember, they're used to getting crap. And so they treat you like crap. In other words, with authority, respect, credibility, asking you to cut your bill, all that crap, okay? That's crap. Now, why are you getting it? Because you didn't do the sales presentation. So that's where it started. So right now, he's just Joe Schmo. He's like every other Tom, Dick, and Harry that doesn't, relative to this attorney, because that attorney doesn't know any better. So he's just Joe Schmo, like, just the bad documentation crap is what that attorney's expecting. Okay. So he takes the case through, and then he didn't do all the documentation. Now, for some reason, and I have no idea how this happened, but it actually went to a deposition, which is hard to believe because it wasn't even that good of a case. So let me share with you what happened with the case. And this is where the doctor messed up. There are many areas where he messed up. That was the first one. Okay? Then let's go to these other areas. He did not cover with this attorney the 7 minimum categories that determine the strength of a case. Well, somehow this case gets to a deposition. And that was the first thing I asked him. I said, how did this case even get to a deposition? Because what did the doctor not have? Well, he had mechanism of injury. The patient never got to MMI. He treated the patient for about 3 months, 36 visits, and the patient quit, never came back for care. So what did the doctor do? This is now everything I'm getting ready to share with you. You should know better if you've taken my course, and don't do this, okay? So he goes to the deposition, and he didn't even set the attorney up. So he didn't educate the attorney at all in the deposition. In other words, the 35 questions they ask him in order. He didn't do that either. So what did he have? Well, they had mechanism of injury. They had some subjective findings, but it wasn't at MMI. It was at the last re-exam. And then same with hybrid findings. And he did no objective findings. None. He didn't do any stress x-rays for ligaments. He didn't do Dynarom. He didn't do JTEC. He didn't do any sedimentation blood rate. He did none of it. That's why I'm just astonished that this case even made it as far as a deposition. This is a terrible, now what I'm getting ready to tell you is this was probably a good case, but because he managed it terribly, it was a bad case. And so the guy didn't finish care, no MMI. Well, whose fault is that? That's your fault. You're the doctor. The very first thing you should be explaining to that patient after when you do your report of findings, you need to explain 2 things. What happens if he misses case and doesn't get the physical medicine, and how it can cause permanent problems to some degree. Now that's based on the science of the 3 phases of healing. Number 2, so that's a pain motivator. And number 2 is, and by the way, we're not threatening him. It's his choice. We're giving him information. I'm not saying, hey, you need to come here. I'm not going to be a salesman. I'm just going to give him the information, the pain pleasure information, and normal people will move away from pain. That's what normal people do. We didn't do that. So he didn't explain that. And then he didn't explain how a lapse in care, how bad a lapse in care hurts the case. Well, the patient not only didn't make it the MMI, he didn't have a check-out exam, didn't have MMI, and there was a big lapse in care. And the doctor didn't have the documentation to support the lapse in care. So guess what, where the insurance attorney went? He went to no objective evidence. The patient didn't go all the way through care and quit care and didn't even follow up with care. I mean, he just got destroyed in this deposition. You know, why should this, I mean, he just got destroyed. Okay. Now that should not have happened at all. And he took my course. I couldn't believe it when he told me everything that went wrong. So here's all the things. He didn't do all that. And then when he didn't get the documentation for the lapse in care. Remember, anytime there's a lapse in care, and by the way, when there's a lapse in care, you better be telling those patients those 2 items immediately as soon as they come back. The 3 phases and the possible potential of a permanent injury without physical medicine, and then how that is the number 1 factor that will hurt the injury award is missing the appointments because the insurance company makes it look like they're not getting better. And when they finish care and they don't get some type of periodic palliative care, that hurts also. So it's like he didn't even take my course. Okay. So we talked and I pointed all these things out to him. And that's why I'm surprised it even went to a deposition. I said, first, you should have did the sales presentation with the attorney to shift his consciousness so he treats you with authority and respect, number 1. Number 2, you should have explained to the attorney obviously, if attorneys try to take patients out from under care, you need to explain the 3 phases of healing and how that relates to the potential injury awards. There's no MMI and permanency, and how that limits 2 of the 4 potential injury awards. That didn't happen in this case. The attorney didn't try to take him out from under care. So number 2, you should have explained to the patient right up front, what happens when he misses appointments relative clinically and for the injury award. That should have been up front also. And then when the patient missed, and then he never got the MMI. And when he did, he never did in the original exam, the patient had spinal complaints and a knee complaint. And he never did stress x-rays to evaluate the ligaments. Never. I mean, this was like, he didn't do anything except, the crap that the average chiropractor gives attorneys. So, and then, so we got no x-rays with potential ligament. We've got no dynarom with pathological nerve damage. We've got no JTEC with pathological muscle weakness. We've got no blood tests showing objective third-party inflammation. In other words, the most important part of the case, we don't have. And then we don't have an impairment rating. And so remember, because you don't have an impairment rating, you cannot give impairment indexes. The 2 most important parts of the injury award: was there a permanent impairment, and what pain and restrictions did it cause with the patient's ADLs? So he couldn't do that either. He missed all of it, and he took my course. I couldn't believe it. And he's a bright guy. I couldn't believe it. And then so somehow this gets to a deposition. Well, he's not even explaining to the attorney, if this is a strong case or not. Good thing, because he didn't even do what was needed to see if it was a strong case. But somehow it made it to a deposition. And I got to tell you, I don't know how that made it to a deposition. Usually when you don't have all that evidence, you just need to settle and move on. So that attorney was pushing that one. And then he did not explain to the attorney the 35 questions he needed to ask him to sequentially go through and build the case, to tell the story, to support the injury award. Didn't do any of it. And this was a big attorney. This was an attorney from a large law firm with a lot of PI cases. So I just wanted to share with you, don't do these things. Don't do these things. So what should have happened? As soon as that patient came in, so the patient already came in with an attorney, and remember, that's the easiest attorney to switch over, because they have to listen to you because you have their patient. That's the reason you get to them, and basically you do the patient, and you use this patient's initial exam findings, letting them know their initial exam findings are not MMI, but that's how you personalize the presentation. He has to listen to you. He's got to hear you, okay? And if you can't do it in person, you always want to do it in person, way more effective. If you can't do it in person, do it on Zoom. Don't do this in an email or text or on the phone, if any way possible, because remember, 55% of communication is visual. So do it in person if you can, if they're local. If they're not local, do it on Zoom, okay? So what he should have done is explain to the patient within the report of findings, those two factors. Hey, this is how you're going to heal relative to the 3 phases of healing, and the potential complicating factors if he doesn't receive physical medicine, especially in the repair phase of healing. That patient should know that's a huge pain-based motivator alone to stay on their schedule. And then the doctor should have also explained how it hurt the injury award, because the insurance company looks like they don't have a problem. Okay, so that's what should have happened. Then he should have also had the attorney explain to him. He should have told the attorney what he explains to the patient to stop missing. And if the patient did miss, he needs to explain it. And then he needs to call the attorney and say, hey, the patient missed. I need you to make sure you call him, so you have not only you explaining it, but he has the attorney explaining how it's going to hurt the case. So you should have done that also if the patient missed, okay? Now, then when there's a lapse in care, remember, that's a red flag. When there's a lapse in care, that's a red flag. They're gonna point to that in the settlement to show that this isn't that big of a case, the guy lapse care. And this is why you need to have the lapse in care document. And what does that show? You need to dig. You need to dig. What did they do for home care? Go through all the categories of home care. Did they take aspirin, ibuprofen, Motrin, prescription drugs? Did they have to rest? How much? What was the frequency? Did they have to rest? How much? What was the frequency? Were they limited in what they were doing? Any of the activities they were doing, work, at home, ADLs, were they limited? See, you're trying to document all the limitation and home care. Did they use a brace? Did they use an ice pack? You've got to document. You got to dig for this. They won't naturally give it to you. What you're trying to do is save the case, is what you're trying to do. And then you have to explain why. So you want to try to show that they did do some form of home health care, or even if they saw another provider, that's great. But that's usually not the case. Usually when people lapse care, they don't see another provider. So you need to dig for it. You're trying to save the case. And then the number 2 is you need to get an explanation. You got to get a decent explanation why he missed, that it would make sense to a jury. Was he afraid he was going to get fired if he missed work to come in? Could he not come in for some reason? He didn't have a car. He was out of town. You've got to dig for this, okay? To show that, yeah, he missed care, but he did continue therapy, and these were the legitimate reasons why he missed care, you see? So that's up to you. That's up to you. You got to dig for it, okay? And you should have all this on the document, all this in your documentation. Okay, so that's the next thing he should have done. And then he should have done the motion x-rays up front to check for ligamentous damage. He did not. He didn't do any of the ligamentous or stationary x-rays. So he had nothing. and then he had no dynarom, this case probably would have had positive altered intersegmental findings with primary findings, with secondary findings of lordosis or physiological stress line. It probably would have had it. That would have given a 10 to 15% impairment rating. He probably would have been positive for the dynarom. He did not even do. Remember, that's pathological damage to the nerves. Permanent pathological damage to the nerves. That's a 1-2 punch. And remember, these are really important factors because it's not your opinion. It's not the chiropractor's opinion. It's a third-party machine. It's a third-party objective machine with a report. That creates tremendous value for these attorneys. Remember, you don't have value as a chiropractor until you create it. They see you they've got a ton of bad experiences with chiropractors and documentation and high bills. There's nothing good. If they had good experiences, they would be looking for you, not you looking for them. Okay? So you got he didn't do the dynarom, didn't do the JTEC, didn't take the patient to MMI, didn't do a good job of documenting the lapse in care, and then he didn't teach the patient, the attorney. Remember, what's the single most important concept to get across to the attorney? It's not that they won a big award. I say this over and over and over and over again. It's that they know that you know all the categories of documentation and makes a stronger weak case, irregardless of the case. That's the single most important. You know what the hell you're doing, irregardless of the case. And then the second most important factor is not the amount of the injury award. It's a 3-to-1 or greater ratio. That's the single two most important factors. The 7 minimum steps that determine the injury award. And of course, that's even in greater detail in the presentation. That's what creates authority, credibility, or respect, not one particular diagnostic or a case that did well. It's that you know everything. Because remember, most cases are not going to be big cases. They're not. So if you hang your hat on that, you're going to lose the majority of time. But what you won't lose when you do this is credibility and authority and a great 3-to-1 or greater injury award. And that's what matters to the attorneys with all these cases. 3-to-1 injury award relative to medicals. And you should easily be doing that. And now the case that I just shared with you, I doubt that he has it. I doubt that he's going to get a 3-to-1 medical award. And that's probably why that's probably why the attorney sued, even though the attorney didn't realize that he had nothing. He didn't have much of anything. So he's wasting his time suing, going into a deposition, all because of the fault of my client and not educating the attorney and what he should have done. Okay? So this is how you create credibility, respect, authority, and get referrals. Not doing what he did. He was just Joe Schmo. So those are all the things he didn't do that he should have done. And if he would have done all those, chances are he'd had a good case, MMI, and impairment rating. He would have had at least 1, 2, or 3 objective findings. He would have had all 7 categories, not just primary, but secondary findings. Okay. And that alone probably would have prevented it from going to a deposition. It would have probably, the attorney would have probably gotten much more than a 3-to-1 and been fine with it and moved on. Okay, probably, just from experience. I'm just sharing that. So anyway, I just wanted to share with you that, because what's so disheartening about that is he took my course. It's like he didn't even take my course. I'm like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Well, you're not going to be the authority doing that. You're Joe Schmo. So now he's in recovery mode. I reminded him all this, and he's like, oh my God, what was I thinking? So now he's in recovery mode, and so we figure out a way to get back to the attorney to try to save face and create authority. But he's behind the 8 ball now. He was not a shining star. Okay. So I just wanted to share with you those factors. Don't blow it. This was too easy of a case just to do everything right. It was too easy. And he blew it. Don't blow it.